Hello and welcome. Here's your summary of the major global news stories happening right now. We're going to start in Nigeria with a really tragic number. Over 160. That's the initial count of people killed in a horrific massacre in the country's Kwara state. This is one of the deadliest extremist attacks Nigeria has seen in months. And the context here is just chilling. According to a survivor, the militants first sent a letter to the villages of Woro and Nuko. They were demanding that residents adopted their radical version of Sharia law. When the villagers refused, the attackers came back and carried out this massacre. So, to break it down, the attacks took place over 2 days in early February, and it was clear retaliation because the community rejected the militants' ideology. In response, Nigeria's President Bola Tinubu has launched Operation Savannah Shield. It's a new military operation designed to protect these villages and hunt down the people responsible. Okay, let's shift our focus now over to Asia. There was a snap general election in Japan on February 8th, and that has produced a really decisive result. The result was a massive, and I mean massive, landslide victory for Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi's ruling coalition. That's the Liberal Democratic Party and the Japan Innovation Party. Together, they snagged 352 seats, which just sails past the 310 seats they needed for a two-thirds supermajority in the lower house. And the reaction from the financial markets? It was immediate and historic. After the election results came in, Japan's Nikkei share average surged, closing at a record-breaking high of 56,363 points. So, what does this powerful new mandate actually mean for Japan's policies? Well, it looks like Prime Minister Takaichi has a dual focus. Domestically, it's all about boosting the economy. We're talking a huge stimulus package and tax cuts to fight inflation. But on the world stage, the focus is on a peace through strength agenda. That could mean beefing up Japan's military and even rethinking the country's post-war pacifist principles. Hey, just a quick moment here. If you're finding these direct summaries useful, a quick like and subscribe is a great way to make sure you stay informed with our future updates. Now, let's turn to the Middle East because there's been a pretty significant diplomatic development. For the first time since June of 2025, the United States and Iran have held high-stakes indirect talks, with Oman playing the role of mediator. But here's where it gets really interesting. Both sides came to the table in Muscat with fundamentally different goals. Iran was adamant that the talks had to be exclusively about its nuclear program. The U.S., on the other hand, wanted a much broader conversation, one that also included Iran's ballistic missile program and its support for regional militias. Now, despite those conflicting agendas, the initial feedback was surprisingly positive. Iran's foreign minister, Abbas Araghchi, actually described the atmosphere as a very good start. It seems both sides have agreed to head back to their capitals to consult, with plans to continue the talks at a later date. All right, let's move over to South Asia. Tensions are escalating dramatically in Bangladesh ahead of their general election. This is the first election since the ouster of the former Prime Minister, Sheikh Hasina. You know, the situation there has intensified really quickly. Ever since the election was announced back in December, political violence has been on the rise. Then, a prominent opposition activist was killed in January, which ramped up the fear. And in early February, the interim government launched something called Operation Devil Hunt, a nationwide crackdown that's led to over 1,300 arrests, all just before the vote on February 12th. And the scale of what's happening is pretty stark. We're talking at least 16 political activists killed since December, with more than 60 separate clashes recorded across the country. The election itself is being called a bipolar contest between the Bangladesh Nationalist Party and the 11-party alliance. And in the middle of all this tension, about 120 million people are eligible to vote. And we're going to end our summary in Europe, covering a catastrophic weather event that has battered the Iberian Peninsula. Just look at this number. Over 4 billion euros. That's the staggering preliminary estimate for the economic damage caused by Storm Kristen in Portugal alone. It makes it the most destructive and costly storm in the country's entire recorded history. So what made this storm so incredibly powerful? Well, experts think a rare phenomenon called a sting jet might have formed as it hit land. A sting jet is basically a narrow, descending blast of extremely high-speed winds. If that's what happened, it would help explain the record-breaking wind gusts of over 208 kilometers per hour that caused so much of that localized, catastrophic damage. The storm's impact across Portugal was absolutely devastating. At its peak, 1 million customers, that's 10% of the entire population, were left without power. 13 deaths have been reported. The damage to infrastructure is just immense, with homes, factories, and even landmarks like the Larea Municipal Stadium being destroyed. Agricultural losses alone are estimated at nearly 800 million euros. So that's been a summary of some of today's major global events. All of these situations are, of course, still developing.
Another update will follow in 24 hours.